Welcome to Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Good morning, Houston. Good morning, Harris County. Good morning to the great state of Texas. Good morning to the United States of America. And of course, good morning to the world and to every area where our 100,000 watt, and I'm getting it right this time, our 100,000 watt transmitter gets to every corner of southeast, northeast East Texas, as well as parts of Louisiana and otherwise, and our internet spiders itself throughout the entire world, of which we have people all over. Anyway, folks, I hope you had a great day. The cold is over. Well, for now, till tomorrow, I guess. But you know what? We can defrost and make sure all's working fine. Anyway, we want to uh, throw it to our great, wonderful studio. We have, well, I'll talk about it after I hear from our great studio. Good morning,
Okay.
Howard. Good morning, Jack.
Good morning, Egberto.
And good morning, Egberto. And good morning to Goodrich, Texas. Why the heck not?
Why the heck
Want
not?
to say, why the heck not? Well, say good morning to Harry also, who wanted to hear some Peter White this morning. That's Caravan of Dreams that you heard, or part of it. And that's about it. I mean, I'm looking at this Texas weather here. It's almost as psychotic as our legislature. Doesn't know what it's doing. Hot, cold, what the hell? You know?
I
No, it's just a
I've
rainy
never heard
day.
someone refer to the climate as psychotic, but you know what? That is the exact behavior of our climate.
Pretty much. What?
Texas weather is, wait a minute, it'll change.
Yeah, wait an hour. If you don't like it now, it'll change. Oh, what you got there, Jack? You got some wisdom for us
Well,
today?
something on what they're going to be talking about, Egberto, today.
Oh, ooh,
The
okay.
Supreme Court.
Ooh,
Yes.
losers.
Look out. The Supreme Court is hearing cases for what? More corporate deregulation. America is already suffering the effects of deregulation, starting with free speech money, co opting the Supreme Court, judges for hire. Politicians are in the hip pockets of the corporate industrialists. Unregulated capitalism is a demon that only knows hunger and will devour all, even itself. Do you want to live in a world where the CEO makes decisions based on the bottom line about your life?
I did live in that world.
Not me.
I lived in that world called iHeartMedia, and the
Oh
CEO was a con
yes.
man. The CEO is a
Yes.
con man, and he made decisions about my life. Oh, we don't need to reward that hard worker down there. We need more gallons of gasoline for my jet.
Yeah, my jet.
Yeah, well, I got an idea for his jet. Anyway,
W-
what you got for us today, Egberto?
Well, before we get started, did you know that the Baltimore Sun just got bought by a right-wing group? And he goes, the new guy, I can't remember his name, goes ahead and he tells them, "You guys better make me some dollars." And he wants them to operate as a clickbait newspaper. But today is Thursday, and if it's Thursday, it is our great Houston Democracy Project Guys Day. Neil Aquino, good morning, Neil. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing, excuse me, I'm doing all right. Good morning, Egberto. Good morning, studio, and good morning, global audience.
Well, we're going to have a good show. Neil, you have a lot to talk about, but before we get started, uh, I have some very, very sad news. It hit me like a rock yesterday. Uh, Obedike Kamau, who was a longtime member of the KPFT family, Obedike Kamau, who had his a great show on this program. Obedike Kamau, who also once served as the general manager of KPFT, has left us, has passed away. I hadn't known there was anything happening or of the sort, but when I got the call yesterday, my heart just sank. Uh, KPFT giant has left us. Obedike played just about every role at KPFT. Like I said, they were both officially and unofficially. He was the co-host of Self-Determination. He was our general manager. He was a promoter of this valuable space. He was a scholar and an activist, a PhD, you name it. That was Obedike Kamau. I met Obedike at a rally at Houston City Hall one autumn. I can't recall how I got into discussing my book as I see it, Class Warfare, the only resort to right wing doom with him. All I remember is him saying that I had to do his show. I was honored. It was my first Houston interview of the book. In subsequent years, I spent time with Obedike marching in the MLK parade. We even did some live podcasts with a new project he had started. I love this man. He was a walk-in repository of knowledge. I learned much from this guy in real time. Sometimes we're sitting down in front of the mics. There will be 4 or 5 of us doing a live podcast, and I would sit down and just listen to him like, hell, how did you know that? You know, I hadn't spoken to him actually, I don't think I've spoken to him since the pandemic because I was in DC taking care of my daughter and many other things, but it just broke my heart that I didn't make contact. The pandemic has really sort of messed with a whole lot of our relationships, especially if there are people that are sort of distant away in miles. But anyway, Kavadike, rest in peace, brother. You will be missed here at KPFT, and sometime I hope we can do a program with other hosts out here who have interfaced with Obedike. But love you, brother. Rest in peace. Anyway, Neil, I needed to say that piece for my brother. Patrick Baron in the chat, welcome aboard. Neil, let's go ahead and talk about SD 15, which is Senate District 15. Again, you saw several candidates in an interview. What are your thoughts about our democracy as these people strive to become our next state senator?
Right. So last night there was a debate for Senate District 15. This is the Senate district that Mayor Whitmire left to become mayor. And there's going to be a special election at some point. It's not yet been declared by the governor. He's setting a date for whenever he feels he can, cause most harm for the Democratic Party. And so there'll be this year an election to complete the term, and then there'll be an election for the full 4-year term. And there was a debate last night with 5 of the 6 candidates: State Representative Jarvis Johnson, Beto Cardenas, Kartik Sora, Todd Litton, and Molly Cook. Molly was the candidate who ran a strong race against Senator Whitmire in 2022, no longer last year. And there's also a woman, Michelle Bonton, who was not last night, and it was a journalist from the Houston Landing, which has been in the news itself for firing its editor and its investigative reporter in the last week or so. So the 5 candidates were there, and Kartuk and Molly are probably the more progressive of the candidates. State Representative Johnson was probably the most conservative of the 5. He wasn't conservative, but the most moderate or establishment, which he spoke to himself. And Todd Litton, who ran against Dan Crenshaw in 2018, and Beto Cardenas, who's not been a familiar name, but worked for Kay Bailey Hutchinson 8, 9, 10 years ago, whenever it was, and says he's a very good Democrat. But they were all striking similar themes yesterday of opposing Dan Patrick, opposing Greg Abbott. I had gotten a poll, one of those push polls they term, online for Todd Litton. I'm almost certain it was for Todd Litton. I can't prove it 100%, but this was about 4 weeks ago, and you could tell that he was that the poll was strategizing. What should I say? What should I say? Should I be a little more aggressive? Should I not? So Todd Linton is a decent guy and a hardworking guy, but and only put up a issues page. Only started talking about his platform a week or two ago. He's been in the race for 5 or 6 weeks, so they were poll testing or consultant testing their race as well. What I found from the Houston Democracy Project, and you can go to HoustonDemocracyProject.com or Google it, Houston Democracy Project. And I wrote a daily blog on this yesterday evening, that they all spoke about increasing turnout and consistent year-round efforts to increase turnout in SD 15. And this is another gerrymandered, safe Democratic district with low turnout. Mayor Whitmire, just like Sheila Jackson Lee in her congressional district 18, was unable to excite or increase turnout. And one of the hardest things, I think, for people who work as volunteers in Democratic Party politics is that our candidate elected officials really don't care about turnout. They care about a safe seat, not having a primary challenger, and just getting in there. And so all of these candidates, all 5, spoke about working to increase turnout in the district as one of the issues. And it's super important. We have to defeat Ted Cruz. We have to hold the county, and we can't give up defeating Donald Trump in Texas. So they spoke about their issue positions. And again, Molly and Kartuk are the most progressive of the crew. But it was just interesting to hear them actually say all that. I hope we're seeing other candidates do that in other races this year.
That is great, Neil. Thanks for that update. I think I think there are great candidates that are running there. Personally, I'm kind of partial to Molly because of how active she was in Austin and how she beat the pavement while she was running against Whitmire and made an acceptable performance. I know Todd Litton. Todd Litton is a nice guy. Todd Litton is also it is a blessing to be able to have choices like the people that you heard at the debate yesterday. So they would all make good candidates, or rather good senators for their district. Now, you wrote another blog that I want to touch on, and this one covers everybody in every corner of the United States that are activists or that are instigators or that are whatever word you want to use yourself, whatever you want to call yourself as being an active person in politics. And that is, you pointed out that on Twitter just happened to shut down a whole bunch of left-wing accounts just out of the blue. They reinstated some of them, but out of the blue, which left a lot of people who communicate via Twitter, giving their message, out cold. So your suggestion is a very good suggestion to them. Talk about it.
Right, and one of those was he was later reinstated, was a investigative reporter for the Texas Observer. So it was journalists, and it was also left wing advocates. And I just said, we've got to make certain that we have our own ability to contact people, whether that be their email, it could be their phone number, it could be their street address. If there's people you value as an activist, people whom in an authoritarian situation, which every day becomes more conceivable. Donald Trump has talked about the Insurrection Act. He's talked about suspending civil liberties. And, one of the things I consistently hit on the Houston Democracy Project is that we have to be able and willing to imagine this as possible. I think that's one of the biggest hurdles. And so we need to be engaged in preparations. Those preparations involve mental health. It's a mental stress to consider an authoritarian state. It's about self-protection, however that works in your home. And it's about being able to contact folks who you'll engage in activism with, who you'll just want to rely on, talk to, seek solace from. So phone numbers, email addresses, street addresses to people you feel you could turn to in a political crisis. And we know whether it's China, Iran, that when social media companies when governments ask these social media companies, hey, will you cut those links? Will you not let people communicate? Will you block out certain words? They'll do it. And it can happen. It can happen right here.
Let me ask you something, Neil. Earlier on, you mentioned the Landon. The Landon is a Houston, well, independent journal rag here.
Right.
What happened? I didn't hear the story.
The Houston Landing fired last week, 6, 7 days ago, whenever it was, fired its editor in chief, Ms. Honor, and fired, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her name, their lead investigative reporter in the Landing, which I think was a $20 million startup in the last 7 or 8 months, is a paywall. And it's an additional, it's one of these nonprofit news sources. You and I were talking
Hmm.
earlier about the purchase by a man named Smith buying the Baltimore Sun, which has a long and storied history. And he's with Sinclair Media, which is turning all these stations right wing. And so the Landing was meant to be, and it's had a lot of good stories. Um, and it's a little nebulous. It's a little nebulous what happened. Um, they're saying that they're publicly saying that the Landing was too similar to the Chronicle. I don't know if that means in not enough social media. I'm not. It's the firing of Ms. Honor. That's his first name was out of the blue, and he was a former editor, politics editor at the Houston Chronicle. But a lot of folks were concerned because we're so used to newspapers cost cutting and shifting all the time, and people had looked for some stability in the
Well, the
Landing, and
reason
I
that I
guess
was
we'll see.
asking about the reason I'm asking about the Landon is, did it seem like they were trying to make a change in direction, maybe taking a position to the right or to the left or something like that, or you're not sure?
No, it wasn't necessarily. No, it didn't seem like necessarily an ideological
Okay.
purpose.
That that
It,
that is the reason
yeah.
I brought that up because I wanted to find out that what if that's where we were heading to. Anyway, folks, the telephone number is 713-526-5738. If you have any questions for myself, for our studio, or for Neil, give us a call, 713-526-5738. Last but not least, on your blogs, you wrote 3 blogs. You're a busy person over the last couple of days, man. But anyhow, let's talk a little bit about. I think what you wanted to say is don't just talk about January 6th. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to ensure that we have a democracy? Everybody knows January 6th was a bad, well, at least 60% of Americans know January 6th was a bad thing. So take it from there.
So my district councilwoman is Abby Kamen, whom is a Democrat, a very cautious, moderate Democrat, and she made a tweet to her credit, I guess, about January 6th. I think she was the only council person who did some of their social media. So in some ways, we're singling her out when she went further, but it's just a tweet. And I made a post and tagged her on Twitter about it, saying that in addition to tweeting, Ms. Kamen could speak far more frankly about the threat to civil liberties. We now have 6 members of City Council who are Republicans. And, Sheila Jackson Lee never said defund the police. And she was made to answer by Mayor Whitmire's police union henchmen. You're defund the police. You're defund the police. Well, we have these 6 City Council Republicans. Why aren't they made to answer? And they should be made to answer for if they support insurrection, if they support Trump, if they support Greg Abbott's statement about shooting migrants. We held Sheila Jackson Lee to something she hadn't said, even, and we let these 6 Republicans skate. Um, you know, and then so I said she should ask the Republicans if they support Trump and authoritarianism. She needs a written plan to increase turnout in District C. These folks could hold democracy town halls. They could talk about the mental health, the self protection, the organizing, mutual aid, voter turnout. And I also have said Abby Kamen is chair of the Public Safety Committee of Council. She's chair. She looked the other way at police abuses towards George Floyd protesters in 2020. You couldn't get her to talk about it. And law enforcement unions supporting election deniers. We've talked now, this will be the 3rd week in a row. We've mentioned that the Houston Police Officers Union supports Ken Paxton. That's not very law and order. And these Democratic Party politicians need decide if the police unions meet the standards of their campaigns. We don't talk about it that way, but why would you accept the support of people supporting Paxton and Trump and Abbott? And if these folks want to support the police, they can support the police just fine. They don't. The union. They don't need to support the law enforcement union to support the police. They can say all the pro police things they want. So Councilwoman Kamen needs to go beyond a tweet, and we need to hold them to it for our public safety.
And that goes across the board, folks, with whatever politician in whatever district in whatever state you're in, to hold them accountable. Whether they're Democrats, Republicans, or otherwise, hold them accountable.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to change the subject and go on to the Supreme Court right now. There's a case out there called Laffer Bright Enterprises versus Raimundo and Relentless Inc. versus the Department of Commerce. Very important case. It's sort of a nebulous case, and a lot of people don't see how that will affect their personal lives. It will affect their personal lives. But I want, before I get into it, several years ago, before the pandemic, while KPFT was still at its location on oh wow, I forgot the street now. Back we're in Caroline now. I forgot the street we're on. Hey, what street were we on at KPFT? I'm getting old. What can I say?
Love it.
Anyhow, love it. Thank you, love it. It wasn't love it. I did a piece on the Supreme Court on why it was so important for Republicans to control the court system. The Republican ideology, and folks, to my Republican listeners, you're my brothers, my sisters. I love you. I just think many times, sometimes we have to be concerned about who we consider our leaders. Okay. And I have a thing against Republican leaders, not based on personalities, but based on policy, based on what they do for people, not only for Democrats or independents, but what they do for you, my Republican brothers and sisters as well. After all, the Medicaid expansion to the Affordable Care Act would do a lot better for Republicans in this state because there are more Republican uninsured in this state than anywhere else. Anyhow, I did a piece on the courts where I stated that given that Republican leadership orthodoxy, there's no intention of changing it. They still see a way that they can run the country, minority rule. How? By controlling the courts. And they are going to nip at every piece so that they can overrule the majority. I want to first play that piece. It's only 3 minutes. And by the way, if we don't get through everything, folks, go to politicsdoneright.com/newsletter for all the subjects that we're going to cover and all the videos, etc., and the articles that we don't cover here. You can see what we intended to cover, but you come first. Anyway, I want you to listen to this little segment, and then we'll take it. It's a little over 2 minutes, and then we'll come right back.
That piece that I played on the Constitution. When we talk about the merits of the Constitution, what I wanted to do with that argument about the Constitution and what Trump via McConnell is doing with the Supreme Court, with the district courts, with the circuit courts, is to explain something important to you. It's not enough for us to go out there and just say we want to win the presidency or we want to win this Congress seat or anything. We have to change the mold of the country, the psyche of the country, because there's so much that they know that most people don't. Like when McConnell is playing with the Supreme Court and playing with the district court and playing with the circuit court, a lot of people sit back and they don't think it has much impact on them. We are trying to establish a more perfect union. We are trying to establish a system that works for everybody, which means we no longer allow a plutocracy to take it all. But you know what? The American population is wising up, but they're already preparing for a wise population, and they're using the Constitution to prepare for that wise population. How so? Everybody who studied their government classes understand there's a judiciary, a legislative, and a executive. The legislative makes the laws, the executive executes the laws, and the judiciary interprets the law's constitutionality. Well, if we are going to win all these new elections and we are going to win the presidency, the only help the plutocracy could possibly have is the only undemocratic portion of the American system that was designed constitutionally, and that is the judiciary. The judiciary can take any piece of law that the legislative branch passes and the executive branch affirms and say a corporation who now owns all these judges can now say, well, that law is unconstitutional and it then cannot be implemented. We already have gerrymandering that has made the country a country that's not ruled by most. California has probably 40 million people or more, however million they have. And some one of the Dakotas have a few 100,000. And both of them get 2 senators. Wow, that's a lot of power for a little bit of people. And now the Supreme Court is preeminent. The Supreme Court is undeniably the most powerful branch of the government, and a lot of people don't tell you that. They always talk about, oh, we have the checks and balances. There ain't no check against the Supreme Court unless we're going to then implement the difficult thing that's called impeachment. But constitutionally, you can only impeach judges with either 3/5 or 3/4. I don't remember the number, which means you have to have a hell of a supermajority in Congress to do what you have to do. So, folks, the way they intend to destroy the Roman intelligent middle class is to do the constitutionally undemocratic thing, and that is to use the courts.
And that is to use the courts. And I hope you got that. And this is a clear example of what's going to be done. So I'm going to take the call from Alan, and then we're going to continue with the Supreme Court and what's going on with Laffer Raimundo versus Department of Commerce. Come on in, Alan.
Well, hi, Alberto. Good morning to everyone.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I have to ask this question about this story about how Nikki Haley checked on her voter registration form that she was white.
Yes.
It perplexes me as to why she thinks. I mean, why would she do that?
Okay, well, let me just say this first of all. Okay, I don't know how often you listen to my show, but I don't believe in race. Right? Race is a stupid thing.
Apparently she does.
I'm going to answer that. I want to kind of give a little bit more context. When Colin Powell went to South Africa, I think it was Colin Powell to South Africa during the apartheid times, right? There was no definition of how you treated a black person going to an apartheid state where black people can't be in hotels, etc. So legally speaking, they called him they call him an approved. They call him I forgot what was the exact term. An honorary white person. That's what they called black people when they go to South Africa to and use the services that are denied their black residents. Let's come to the United States as well. There are several instances in the United States where people, I mean, some people pretty damn dark, were classified as white, including Egyptians and others, right? And that was to delineate who they were. And Nikki Haley took a lot of flack for putting down that she was white on her paperwork, but I believe based on her age, and she's not a spring chicken, so when she was born, there were still a few little things and whatever. I think if they had a choice of black and white, like some forms have, black white, she probably would have chosen the white. So I don't look. I think she's a disturbed person from not knowing who she is, but I don't think it's all that it is all that macabre that she chose white when she filled out the paperwork. Sanchez right here in town fills it out as white as well. So just thought I might say that out.
There's a whole history.
Go ahead, Neil.
There's the whole history of that. What census designation you were allowed to make, and Latino immigrants coming from Cuba. Um, are you white? What color are you? You were white in Cuba. You're black here. But there's a whole history of that, which got into census designations, legal designations, people's own conceptions of themselves, and that's a story as old as the country.
Yeah, let me just say also, Alan, on a personal note, when I came to the United States, right, and the forms used to say black, white, or Latino slash
Mm-hmm.
Hispanic, right? And I'm from Panama. I am a Latino, right? But I always felt that oomph just saying Latino when I filled out my thing because I mean, there's a in the United States, well, not only in the United States, but elsewhere, the first thing people see when they see me, it's black. They don't see Spanish
Mhm.
speaking black person, which means he's a Latino. So in my case, I would always check two boxes. Probably screwed up the computer program, but I would check two boxes. I would check black and I'll check Latino. So I hear about Nikki, but let's not allow the media to turn it into more of a story than it really is. I mean, I care more about policy than race any
Yeah.
particular day. So anyway, Alan, anything else you want to say, my brother?
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, this kind of gets into. I mean, I don't want to go too much off into this, but it kind of gets into what you were saying about how California with 40 million people, as opposed to some other state with a few 100,000 people, and yet they
Right.
both get the same amount of senators. And a lot of that was just to preserve the system of slavery. Now, people are going to say, "Oh, what are you talking about?" And it's a long drawn out thing, but
No,
it, it yeah, it
Alan,
speaks.
you are so right. Alan, no, it's not drawn out at all, Alan. You are so right. The land owning states, big land, lot of slaves, little amount of people,
Yeah,
all they didn't want to lose their power federally. So you are absolutely right, sir.
they were essentially stealing the suffrage of the Africans that were there, and that's why we had all the things with the Three-Fifths Compromise and all the rest of
Right,
that other nonsense, and really the Electoral College, because in a
right,
real democracy, as you know, Alberto, it's based on everybody has a say, and whoever gets the majority of the says wins. Well, that's not what we have when we vote for president, and that's all. That was all to keep the slave system in place, and that's ultimately, I mean, there's other things having to do with people's economic opportunities and all, but that's ultimately what led to the Civil War.
absolutely. Look, brother Alan, thank you for your
I'm
most
going to move
intelligent.
along, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your most intelligent commentary, my dear brother. I appreciate you. Folks, the telephone
Okay,
number is
all right.
713. Have a good one, Alan. The telephone number is 713-526-5738. Again, if you want to make some commentary, give us a call, 713-526-5738. Now, I want to go ahead and talk about this Supreme Court issue now. And I'm going to, so that I'm a bit more concise, I'm going to read the article by a piece of the article from Jake Johnson, who is at Common Dreams. And it goes as follows. Supreme Court hears Coke backed cases designed to unleash the regulatory bonanza. Everything from the climate to consumer safety could be worse off thanks to this potential decision and the corporate lobbyists who brought us to this point. The conservative dominated U.S. Supreme Court on Wednesday heard oral arguments in a pair of cases taking direct aim at a critical precedent that, if overturned, would gut federal agencies' ability to set and enforce regulations, a potentially massive blow to climate, civil rights, public health, and much more. Central to the Lopper Bright Enterprises versus Raimundo and Relentless Inc. versus Department of Commerce is so-called the Chevron Doctrine, which stems from the 1984 Supreme Court opinion that said judges should defer to federal agencies' reasonable interpretation of a law if Congress has not specifically addressed the issue. Congress write laws, and they write laws that many times they expect an agency that has learned people in it, engineers and doctors, etc., to determine how best to implement the flavor of the law. Well, oil companies don't like that because when sometimes the flavor of the law isn't quite specific when it comes to the environment. You can't leave dioxins in the ground. You can't. They don't want that. They want the Congress to have written you can't drop dioxin into the ground because and not give broad latitude. What that means is it's next to impossible to create create good regulations to protect you and me because they want Congress to specifically say the thing while it's normal to have agencies based on the flavor of what Congress wants to create these regulations. Unfortunately, it's called the Chevron Doctrine, which was used since the 1980s to determine whether agencies have the power to create these particular rules. I'm going to pause here because I gave you the flavor of what the Supreme Court thing is and jump to Gonzalo. Gonzalo, come on into the discussion. How are you doing this morning, sir?
Yeah, I want to just talk about the item you brought about races. So I used to teach
Yes.
Spanish for native speakers, and that was a good controversy whenever I asked them the question, "Are you Hispanic or Latino?" And
Oh,
then we
wow. Yeah.
say, "No, I'm Hispanic or I'm Latino." The same question you try to answer, and I think in the form, uh, there is a misinterpretation about the difference between ethnic group and
Hmm.
the country we were colonized. Because if we say
Right.
which are the Latino countries in South and Central America, and we say except the English-speaking countries, the rest are Latinos. Why?
Latinos.
Because
Latinos.
we
Right.
Portuguese and Spanish and Italian and French are from a common trunk, which is Latin. But when we refer to the term Hispanic, it's because of a colonization, which most of the countries in South America suffered, and that is related to
Spain.
Spain.
Right.
But I would have revised those terms and then say, well, what is your race? And we would say Asian, Caucasian, uh, Afro, or mixed. And I mean, I'm mixed because I'm mixed with Spanish blood and Cuban blood. Probably you're mixed too. But since I mean, they don't refer to that very accurately, and that's why there is a confusion. And I think that's what uh, it is all about in schools and the debate about pure race and all that stuff that bring us to the Nazis with their purity and the white nation and all that stuff. And probably that's the thing we want to avoid. So we are, and as you said, I don't care much about race because at some point we're all humans and we have been mixed with different cultures and different races. And, there are some theories and some websites that want to determine the purity of your race, and people go there and check, oh, I'm 90% white and I'm Slav or I'm Caucasian. And
Hmm.
those are things that are not really important, as you said.
They're not. It's not Gonzalo. It's not only that they're not important. From both a physiological and an intellectual point of view, it is rather stupid, and it is actually used. Race is actually used for economic reasons. But the only people who know that race is used for economic reasons are the people on the top. I always tell people you don't hear billionaires, irrespective of race, talking about race. Right? They talk about green. They don't talk about race because race is a tool that is used to control us all. The fact of the matter is, we were all to do the DNA test, we would all be shocked. And if you know your anthropology, it's and more, you know that given that we had a common origin, everybody that isn't pure black, and I don't think there's a pure black anymore, is just a mutation based on location and how they migrated. So it is the whole thing is so stupid that was used by a lot of, mostly again, the capitalist structure to actually gradate people so that there is a pecking order that keeps them in power. If there's a pecking order, if a white guy who is a poor white guy can say, at least I'm not black. If a poor whatever, if you have this gradation between people, then you can have folks on the top that sits down and manage things. One of these days, I'm going to do an entire racial show on how stupid race is and how the people on the top, from the right white billionaires to the black billionaires, that is what we should call a group, right? Because they suffer from the same disease, which is to relay pill for us all. Anyway, Gonzalo, I have some more calls. Give me a quick
You know,
5 seconds before I let you go.
A simple fact. If you go to Walmart toys, you will see
Mhm.
some toys are portrayed as black, marked down,
Mhm.
just because
Yeah.
you want to
Oh
sell them.
yeah. There's a whole history behind that. But anyway, Gonzalo, gotta run to Alistair. So muchísimas gracias por la
All
llamada,
right.
and we'll talk tomorrow. Alistair, come on in, my dear beautiful sister. How are you doing this morning?
Hey, good morning, brother. Good morning, Houston, and everybody else listening. I'm just talking about the Supreme Court.
Mhm.
I have been on the bandwagon for expanding it for
Mhm.
a very long time. Yeah. So Joe Biden slept on it, and he slept on it deliberately because, now if he were to even fancy the idea of expanding the Supreme Court, it isn't going to happen. It's going to be it would be a repeat of what Mitch McConnell did to Barack Obama.
Mhm.
But it's like, we need it expanded. We need it to be expanded.
Alistair,
They
you're
can
absolutely right. Go ahead.
They're killing the environment even more now
Mhm.
by removing the what was it, the Chevron Act or
The
whatever
Chevron
it is they call
Doctrine.
it.
Chevron Doctrine, yes.
The Chevron Doctrine, yeah. And just little by little, one by one, they're going to let the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And
Now,
we're seeing the results of it. We're at each other's throats.
yeah, and
Well,
we gotta do something about it, Alistair. We definitely have to do something about it. And Democrats as a party have been weak in taking power. And just like I said in that video that I just played, the Republicans have always known they could rule by minority rule, both with the Senate as well as the Supreme Court, and they have effectively executed their plan. And there's still time for us to reverse the
exactly.
plan, but it's going to take it's going to take folks being
It's going
bold.
to be even
Yes,
harder now.
right, but you have to be bold. Yes, you have to expand the Supreme Court, and yes, you must kill the filibuster. And the reason you must kill the filibuster is that with several states with small states that have very few people being able to control the Senate, one has to make the undemocratic Senate a bit more democratic. But Alice, anything else you want to say before I jump to Steve?
No, we're good. We're good. Have a good
Thank
day,
you, my
everybody.
sister. You have a wonderful day, sis. Let's talk to Steve. Come on in, Steve. How are you doing this morning?
Hey, good morning, Brother Egberto and Brother Neil. I love Thursdays when you have Neil on because I get to hear, a little bit closer to the ground on political
Yes, you
speak.
do.
Feel...
That's
That's
why I
kind.
love
Thank
Neil
you.
too.
So anyway, thanks. I had a kind of a question. So it seems like voting over the last decade or so has been a little bit tougher. Tougher for some to get to the polls, tougher to know what's true as far as the information. It's kind of like driving in Houston on icy roads. Sometimes you just got to be a little bit more careful, or you're going to going to spin out. My question to Neil is, or both of you, like, how do we handle the information to where we can get better politicians locally and more towards, in the state government and more towards nationally? Because right now on the state government, on the Democratic side, I guess we're about 8% down. We have a lot of work to do if we want to get somebody more progressive in there. So it's kind of open-ended question. If you can help me,
Neil.
Well, let me talk. Let me just hit very briefly my common theme, my consistent theme here locally is pressing our Houston City Council to do better. We have 11 Democrats on Houston City Council, and they do not hear from people. I really urge people to go to the City Houston website, find out who your council member is. And don't leave out the 6 Republicans. Often I focus on just Democrats, in part because I've just given up on the Republicans, and that's probably not always the right attitude. I would just really encourage folks to press your local elected officials. They skate. They skate. Our council members are elected in 17, 18% turnout, and then they're 4 years, and they do not hear from us. And I would really encourage that. And I just want to hit my theme consistently of when you see your countywide Democrats. Primary early voting begins February 20th. The primary day is March 5th. Go to the forums and ask them. Go to the forums and ask them your policy question. Ask them what they're going to do for turnout. And the Houston Democracy Project theme is citizen involvement. So I would
And
I
tell
would
them how
really
to get to your website, because you have you give a lot of advice at your website. So let them get to your website. Call it out, please.
HoustonDemocracyProject.com, NeilAquino.com, HoustonDemocracyProject.com, Houston Democracy Project. You can Google it. There's a daily blog. There's a front page. And I put in there, here's how you can interact. Here's what you can ask. And it's frequently the same, very consistent stuff. Just ask them, engage with them, press them, and confront them with the fact that there's an authoritarian prospect right in front of us, and what are you doing? Because they will only do business as usual until they think that it bothers them. Because many of these elected officials, our Democrats, are just looking for a safe harbor in an authoritarian outcome. They are not preparing constituents. They are not telling us to vote. They are in safe gerrymandered districts. And this is advice old as the hills, but you gotta contact them and talk to them. And they're right there.
Let me jump in, Neil, to our brother Steve here. It's all about engaging, and the mere fact that you call and ask that, Steve, and and also make the statements that you've made is what we need everybody to do. You ask several questions. You ask about how do you discern what's truth or not? How do you discern what to do or not? Let me tell you, brother, those are the questions. So I'm going to start right now and say, remember, keep politics done right on your dial, because we try to touch the truth. We remember also, if there's anything that's bugging you that you can't get that you don't feel you're getting a truthful answer politically, you can always drop a line at kpft@politicsdoneright.com. We don't only give you answers, but we give you corroborating information so that we're not just pulling stuff out of what. So I think the fact that you're calling in here is probative. So thank you very much, Steve. I got to go to the other caller. Anything else, real quick? 10 seconds.
Yeah, quick closer. Thank you. On the race question, I like the way the animals do it. They don't rise as much. It's more noses and ears, but they don't judge anybody on the color of their fur. So a lot of times,
thank you, brother. You're a good man. You're a good man. Thank you, brother. Let's go to Karen. Come on in. Thank you. Come on in, Karen.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, I wanna touch on the ethnicity thing. Now, me being a black man, if I'm mixed with white, I'm considered black, right?
Yes. In America, yeah.
Right. Same thing is true for Barack Obama, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the question I want to ask, can you be Hispanic and white at the same time?
Well, look, a lot of Hispanic. If you're in Argentina, if you are in Chile, they have a large population of German Hispanics, and well, that doesn't sound right, but in effect, they would officially be called Latinos. But yeah, and in Panama, the ruling class in Panama, the Tagaropoulos, these different guys, they are white people, but they are considered Latinos. Okay, so Latinos and Hispanic is not a race. It's just about whether you speak Spanish or not, or whether your train comes from Spain or not. That's all it means. And that's what people mix up. I always laugh when they talk about the browning of America. The browning of America is a lot slower than one would believe, because second generation Latinos that are white that come over here from Argentina and Chile, which are more white than, let's say, Panama and Honduras and these other places, they actually become white in their second generation. That's how they classify themselves. That's what I mean, Keron.
Well, I'm not so much, you see, the reason why I'm touching on this because I'm from Miami, where we have a lot of Cubans, and you can't tell them that they are not white.
Right.
Can I say
Yeah, come on in, Neil. Say.
I just read a for the call in for everyone. I just read a book a couple weeks ago called El Norte, Norte, El Norte, the North, the epic and forgotten story of Hispanic North America by a woman named Carrie Gibson. And the theme we're talking here is so consistent a theme. Who's white? Who's black? Who's Creole? Who's mixed? Who can you marry? Who can own property? Who can vote? Who can be of this religion or that religion? Who's indigenous? And it is the whole history of Hispanic North America are these questions, and these were legal, arbitrary decisions meant to include, exclude. Who can we exterminate? El Norte by Carrie Gibson, and it deals with these questions.
Thank you, Neil. Yeah, right. We're running out of time, but that is a very good point to come. Hey, Karen, anything else real quick before I jump to Johnny? Because we only have like 3 minutes and 3 people.
Yeah. I just want to touch on the Cuban issue. A lot of Cubans come here, you cannot tell them that they're white. Henceforth, they move toward the Republican Party, and they are very prejudiced. So I don't see necessarily.
But let me just say real quick, Karan, there's a history with Cuba. Remember, the elite in Cuba during the Batista days were actually white. The people who looked like me in Cuba were sweeping floors, etc. When Castro came into power, that's the only time that folks of color really had jobs like engineers, lawyers, teachers, etc. It's a long story about Cuba. I'll talk about that another time, but you are correct that many of the Cubans isolate themselves, but there's a lot of reasons why they consider them, why many of them had jumped to the Republican Party, but we'll talk about that another day. Thank you so kindly, Keron, for calling. We'll talk another time. I got to jump to Johnny, all right?
Thank you.
Okay, let's go, Johnny. Come on in real quick, brother. I don't have a lot of time.
I know. Speaking of the purposeful confusion and division of people based on their supposed race and the ethnicities and stuff, you will recall that during Bill Clinton's administration, when we had a census in 2000, remember that?
Mm-hmm.
All the controversy around that?
Yes.
As a census worker, we were ordered to, when we showed up at a household that hadn't been enumerated yet, that when we talked to the members of the household, that we would allow them to indicate to us whatever race they wanted to be. So even if they looked obviously black or Latino, if you want to say, or brown, they could say that they were white, and I had to report that as white on the record.
Right.
So the confusion and to disservice people of color in this country, where decision makers with money like to segregate people for the purpose of hiring and firing and real estate redlining, it doesn't help at all.
Absolutely. So, Johnny, as usual, you always have a prescient statement. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor of Politics Done Right, who I haven't heard from in 3 days. Oh, no, I did hear from you about the pipes yesterday. I'm sorry. I did hear from you about the pipes. Anyway, let's go to Manuel. Come on in, Manuel.
Hey, good morning, hermano. ¿Cómo estás?
Luchando con la vida como siempre, hermano. Habla conmigo, por favor.
Sí. Hey, listen, all of you are right. Your points are great. I love the show. I love what everybody presented today. But let me say this to you, and this may sound a little crazy to you and your audience, but let me, who I really admire? Bush and Dick Cheney. They might be, in some people's mind, not the best or whatever, but let me tell you, those guys used to get things done even if it was unpopular. They will do what they have to do to get the things done. And that's what I admire of that duo. Besides all the Democrats, and I'm a Democrat, and I believe in what the Democrats trying to get. But a la hora la verdad, at the end of the day, George Bush, Dick Cheney was a real, get things done kind of guys that took control of.
Manuel, let me first of all tell you that I know exactly what you're trying to say. You're trying to say spine up Democrats. These guys, when they wanted to do something, they got it done irrespective. Democrats need to learn the same thing. And with that, I don't think what you said is all that crazy. Okay? In other words, you didn't say you respected what they did. You said you respected how they did it. And with that, I'll give that to you. But Manuel, I gotta go to the studio, and I appreciate your call as usual, my brother. I want to see if Lee want to say one quick thing. Go ahead, brother. Aquino.
Oh, Houston Democracy Project. Check it out, please. I'm very kind. Thank you for all the kind calls to studio and Egberto for the privilege of being on. And don't forget your local politicians. Call them up, demand more. And there's an authoritarian crisis ahead of us. Ask them to act.
That is Neil Aquino from HoustonDemocracyProject.com. HoustonDemocracyProject.com. Neil, it's always an honor to have you on because you're always saying the no, and you're out there beating the pavement. Let's throw this right back to those wonderful geniuses in the studio.
Well, I think I've learned a new term today called spine up. I've never heard of it before.
Okay, well, yes, spine up.
Spine up. Well, I'm going to spine out of here because you're out of time and Jack has a little bit of wisdom here.
Yes, we are all hybrids. We are all hybrids.
Last I checked, I was human. I didn't know that. All right.
That's
enough of that.
Yeah, hey, it is so true. I mean, I tell you, everybody needs to go ahead and do their DNA test to see all the parts that they're from. It'll be shocking. Anyway, folks, callers, love you guys. Listeners, love you guys. Please continue to listen. Tell people about the show. Tell them about KPFT 90.1 FM Houston. Love you all. Love you, studio. My name is go to politicsdoneright.com/newsletter for what we have not covered. Politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you guys know how I end this baby. I am what? Out.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. Racing the clock, the Louisiana legislature meets this week to hash out new court-ordered congressional voting districts, with 2 of them being majority black. They're also considering new state Supreme Court districts. In November 2023, the Fifth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals ordered Louisiana's legislature to draw new congressional maps. In a state with almost 1/3 African-American population, black voters demanded they be given a second district to elect the candidate of their choice under the Voting Rights Act Section 2. Currently, only 1 of 6 congressional districts is majority black. GOP leaders attempted to block the decision, but ultimately were given until January 31st to pass new maps. The Louisiana Illuminator reports newly sworn-in Governor Jeff Landry, a supporter of the current maps as Attorney General, told the legislature it was out of legal options and to pass new congressional and state Supreme Court maps with 2 majority black districts. Both maps passed out of their committees Tuesday. In calling the special session, Governor Landry also asked the legislature to close the state's primaries by prohibiting unaffiliated and third-party voters from participating, unless the parties decide to allow it. The maps must be adopted before the end of the special session, January 23rd. We have links to the local reporting at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian.
At KPFT, volunteers are the lifeblood of our organization.
Here's what they say about us.
When I volunteer at KPFT, sometimes I call out past people that support us with money. I got a guy who said that KPFT was his life and soul. He was blind. He said he also spent 20 years in prison. But KPFT was his life and soul, listening to the station.
Volunteer with us at KPFT. Call 713-526-4000, extension 3. We're waiting for your call.
This is